Good evening. I'm Teresa Skupik, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, December 16th. We begin tonight in Ottawa, where Parliament Hill was buzzing this morning after Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland announced her resignation. The move came hours ahead of a scheduled fall economic update. In a resignation letter, Freeland said that the past several weeks, she and the Prime Minister had found themselves at odds regarding the best path forward for Canada. She says she will stay on as a Liberal member of Parliament and will run again in the next federal election. Liberal strategist Andrew Perez called the resignation a devastating blow to the government.
Yeah, this represents a devastating blow for the Liberal government. It's really quite unprecedented on the day that Minister Freeland was to stand in the House of Commons and deliver the fall economic statement. We now learn that she's resigning from cabinet effective immediately. This transpired on Friday when Freeland met the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister indicated that he no longer had confidence in her at finance, but offered her a different role. We don't yet know what that role was, but Freeland opted to leave cabinet altogether. And so here we are without a finance minister at a critical juncture for Canada and the Canadian economy as we look to the South with incoming President Donald Trump, who's threatened a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods across the board. And, you know, Minister Freeland, and I've been critical of her communication style in the past, has been an extremely loyal foot soldier to Justin Trudeau since 2013, when she quit her journalism job in New York City to run for the third place Liberal Party. And so we'll see what comes of this, but it also comes on the heels of a resignation from another heavyweight cabinet minister, Sean Fraser, who's resigning from cabinet as Minister of Housing and Infrastructure and won't be running again. And so we don't even yet know who will stand in the House of Commons and deliver the economic statement today. I think this will turbocharge the speculation that Mark Carney will enter cabinet as finance minister, but he doesn't have a seat. And so that also poses complications for this government, having a finance minister who doesn't sit in the House of Commons. And finally, I would say there will have to be a much larger cabinet shuffle either prior to Christmas. I mean, finance will need to fill immediately, but there's a number of other roles for cabinet ministers announced in the fall that they wouldn't be running again. Transportation Minister Pablo Rodriguez resigned, and that post was given to Anita Anand. And also the Workforce Development Minister Randy Boissonnault resigned in scandal recently. So these are all roles that will need to be filled either immediately or in the coming weeks.
Shortly after the announcement from Chrystia Freeland, Pierre Poilievre spoke to reporters in Ottawa.
What we are seeing is the government of Canada itself is spiraling out of control right before our eyes and at the very worst time. Today, mere hours before Trudeau's finance minister was to deliver a fall economic update that was expected to smash through her already massive deficit targets, she announced she no longer has confidence in the Prime Minister. The finance minister is resigning in the middle of an economic crisis, and a fifth of his Liberal caucus has lost confidence in him. Justin Trudeau has lost control, and yet he clings to power.
He brushed off the idea that the Liberals should have a leadership race and instead called for an election. Mr. Poilievre added that ending confidence in the Trudeau government ultimately rests on the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, and argued that the fiscal update should be a confidence vote that would trigger an election if defeated. Canada Post says operations will resume tomorrow morning after its union's month-long work stoppage. More than 55,000 unionized postal workers went on strike November 15th after failing to reach negotiated agreements with the Crown Corporation over key issues, including wages, job security, and how to staff a proposed expansion into weekend delivery. On Friday, the federal government moved to end the strike by referring the dispute to the Canada Industrial Relations Board to see if it could be quickly resolved. But after 2 days of hearings, the board determined last night that negotiations are indeed at an impasse and ordered workers back to work. The board also extended the collective agreements until May to allow the bargaining process to resume. All right, stay with us. When we come back, we'll be taking a look at the latest debate over civilian casualties in Gaza. A new report from a UK think tank suggests that civilian casualties estimates are inflated, and we'll be joined by the author of the report to explain more. After that, Israel has decided to close its embassy in Ireland. We'll have these stories and more right after the break. Stay with us. Health officials in the Gaza Strip say the death toll from the 14-month war between Israel and Hamas militants has topped 45,000 people. The ministry has said that the real toll is higher because thousands of bodies are still buried under rubble or in areas that medics cannot access. However, a new report from the Henry Jackson Society, a think tank based in the UK, is calling those numbers into question and has recently published a report highlighting how these figures may in fact be significantly inflated. Andrew Fox, author of the report and senior fellow with the group, joined us to explain the discrepancy.
It's exceptionally difficult to break down these lists without full access to the Palestinian population registry, without actually going to Gaza and seeing bodies yourselves. It's deliberately exceptionally difficult to dig through this stuff. We have found some anomalies which I think show that these reports are deeply unreliable. And whether those mistakes are in there deliberately, whether they're there because it's chaotic recording bodies in a war zone, either way, they're unreliable. And it's deeply disappointing that the world's media has seized on these figures and publishes them with so little qualification. So the first kind of thing that we found is looking at misrecording of ages and names. We found plenty of men, Mohammed's listed as women. We found where the age has been missing, they've been recorded as a blank and counted as a zero, so they've been recorded as babies. So we found one instance where a 1-year-old suddenly became a 31-year-old man on later lists. Clearly, Hamas's strategy has been to maximize the emphasis on women and children being killed, which of course happens in every war zone and is one of the tragic horrors of war. But by boosting those numbers of women and children, they're being potentially disingenuous or just potentially incompetent. And as I said, either way, it means that these are really unreliable statistics. The next thing we looked at was the methodologies, and they're terrible. I understand that the computer system went down and they've had to record everything by hand. But the disparity between the government media office, the self-reporting forms, and the Ministry of Health is staggering. And the really interesting thing we found is that when you actually look at percentages of people that have been killed by gender and by age, and then look at what proportion of pre-war numbers those represent, it's overwhelmingly men who are being killed. So 42% through the hospital deaths, 62% by family notification, and the Judicial Committee, 53%. So when we take 26% as our starting figure of men, we're almost in every respect double what we would expect it to be if Israel was targeting indiscriminately. And so I think we can fairly safely say that Israel is targeting combatants rather than indiscriminately bombing civilian areas. And I don't think it matters actually that, of course, some of those men will be non-combatants. The key point is that it doesn't represent what an indiscriminate bombing campaign would look like.
A UK-based war monitor says Israeli airstrikes early Monday hit missile warehouses in Syria and called it the most violent strike since 2012. The Israeli military declined to comment on the strikes. Israel has been pounding what it says are military sites in Syria after the dramatic collapse of President Bashar Assad's rule, wiping out air defenses and most of the arsenal of the former Syrian army. European Union nations want guarantees from Syria's new leaders that they are preparing for a peaceful political future where extremism, Russia, and Iran can play no role. The new leadership has yet to lay out a clear vision of how Syria will be governed. An interim government was set up by former opposition forces led by the Islamic militant group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham that the EU and US consider to be a terrorist organization. Israel says it will close its embassy in Ireland as relations deteriorate over the war in Gaza. Israel's decision to close the embassy came in response to what Israel's foreign minister has described as Ireland's extreme anti-Israel policies. Ireland earlier announced that it would recognize a Palestinian state. The Quebec government will provide Ukrainian refugees with at least 3 more years of public health insurance coverage. In a statement sent to Radio Canada on Sunday, the Office of Health Minister Christian Dubé said the public health insurance coverage for Ukrainian refugees, which was slated to expire in March, will be extended by 3 years until March 2028. Last month, Dubé said that the government would find a way to extend their coverage under the province's Public Health Insurance Board. All right, stay with us. When we return, we'll be joined by Brendan Caldwell from Caldwell Securities to discuss gifting stocks this holiday season. And after that, we'll be taking a look at the latest on the mysterious drones appearing in the sky in the U.S. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Finding the right gift during the holidays can always be a struggle, especially if you want it to be useful throughout the year. And what's a gift that keeps on giving? Stocks. Gifting stocks can help your family and friends, especially kids who may benefit most from long-term compounding returns. Stocks can grow or decline in value, and it's important to know how the market could respond to them and what you need to know if you're given stock as a gift. I'm joined now by Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited, to discuss gifting stocks this holiday season. Brendan, thank you for joining me today.
Teresa, great to be here.
Now, what are gifted stocks and how do they work?
Oh, well, there's a few ways you can do it. One can do it. Years and years ago, when my kids were little and still thought I was great, I gave them each 10 shares of Disney and got a physical certificate framed. Those are a bit of a rarity now. Most stocks are just held electronically, virtually, what have you, in investment accounts. But one can still get a physical certificate in some cases. And of course, with Disney, it's a fun certificate. It has all the characters on it, and they own a little bit of the Disney Corporation. So and they've been getting dividends, well, on and off, because Disney actually stopped paying dividends for a few years around the whole pandemic-y thing when the parks were closed. But I think I paid maybe I don't know, $10 a share roughly, and I think it's gone up about 10 times. I probably should have bought them each 100 shares. So that's one way you can do it. So they have a physical manifestation. The point of doing the point of buying shares for kids perhaps is more to get them engaged in the investment process. It's the difference between giving a fish and teaching to fish. And so what a number of my clients do is, where there's trust money or gift money for kids, they will set up an in-trust account, and I'll actually talk to the young people about what they'd like to buy there. And what's interesting about younger people is they just know stuff I don't. They know what's cool. You would think because of this Christmas tie, I would know what's cool, but apparently I don't. So it actually gets them engaged in the process by saying, hey, what about this or what about that?
And how would you go about gifting a stock?
Well, again, there's probably two ways to attack it. One is the physical certificate that probably at this point won't be ready in time for Christmas if you buy some shares of Disney today. But the idea of setting up an account is a good one. So grandfather in trust for grandchild, grandmother or what have you, or parents in trust for children. And then the parents can make some suggestions, or the advisors can make some suggestions, but a lot of the best suggestions come from the young people themselves. I'm thinking about one, a daughter of a friend of mine. In her account, we bought, she lives in Mexico City, and we bought some Grupo Bimbo, which you wouldn't have thought, but it's like the fastest fast food growing chain food supply company, very cool and in Mexico, and she's done very, very well on it. Others, there was an anime company that was invested, maybe didn't do as well, but the process is the benefit, getting them engaged in the process.
Now, how does gifting stock benefit foundations and charities?
Oh, just quickly on that, another thing one can do, particularly in a year like this where there's been a lot of capital gains, so all the tech stocks in particular have run up, what one can do is actually donate stock in kind, that is, as shares, to your favorite charity. And we accept for scores, maybe hundreds of charities, in-kind donations. And the benefit for the donor is that if there's a big capital gain, they get the tax receipt for the full face amount. So if you make a $100,000 donation, you get a $100,000 tax receipt. But if 90,000 of that's capital gains, you don't pay a thing. particularly if, and it looks a little less likely maybe today than it did, if this increased capital gains rate inclusion goes through, that's even going to be a bigger benefit. So if you want to benefit a charity, make an in-kind donation of stocks on which you have a big gain.
And we do just have under a minute, but what are the benefits for the investor who is gifting the stock?
Oh, well, yeah, again, I think the benefits are mostly tax, as well as perhaps finding a relatively inexpensive way of getting themselves into heaven. So if your church, your synagogue, your favorite foundation, the hospital for sick kids wants money, you can make this donation without having to write a check and get all the benefits of the face value of the donation. So we've got accounts set up for a number of charities, and we just sell the donations without charging any commission or anything on it, because I got to get into heaven too.
Brendan, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Teresa. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you as well. All right, stay with us. We'll have more news headlines right after the break. Lawmakers from across the political spectrum criticized the federal government's response to mysterious drone sightings in the Northeast, as officials emphasize there is no evidence of a security threat. The criticism comes a day after the federal agencies leading the response held a news briefing that left reporters and the public with more questions than answers, as they downplayed but simultaneously legitimized concerns about the reported drones. Chris Smith, a New Jersey congressman, said the government is insulting their intelligence by downplaying the situation. And Andrew Donaldson from OrdinaryTimes.com joined us with more on the drone scare.
So there's a very important issue at the heart of this with drones. We know back a couple of years ago, Gatwick and Heathrow in London got shut down over things like drones. We have seen in Ukraine and Yemen the military possibility of drones where you can just put a mortar or a grenade or another small explosive or even kamikaze a drone and cause big problems. And we've seen in the States and in the United States and in Canada that there has been litigation and convictions from everything from using drones to cheat at sports to good old-fashioned peeping Toms trying to look in people's windows. So drones is an important issue. Problem is, we're probably not going to get to the bottom of those important issues with the way this is developing, because this has turned into a good old-fashioned panic, especially in something that is usually one of the dead news spaces right before Christmas in the news media cycle. So what you now have is social media, news media, more and more becoming one and the same. There are some drone sightings. There's been sightings. Those are legit. But then there's thousands and thousands and thousands of false sightings, especially in somewhere in New Jersey, which is some of the busiest aerospace anywhere in the world. People not realizing the difference between helicopters and aircrafts and blinking lights in the night sky, which, by the way, go back thousands of years. You can see things chiseled in stone tablets trying to explain the blinking things in the night sky. So we really have to parse through this thing, and we've really got to put up our antennas when you have politicians going, what we need is funding to look into this and funding to stop it. That's not good. And politicians who try to get funding because they want to stop Venus, the planet, which is the video they share on social media saying, do something about this, even though we know what Venus is. So there's a lot of silly, and there's a lot of panic, but underneath this is a very serious question that needs some very serious deliberation. We're not going to get that with a moral viral panic.
Violence erupted in Glasgow ahead of a soccer Scottish League Cup final between Celtic and Rangers.
Oh my God, get in, get in.
Police say missiles were thrown at officers and there were reports of broken windows. Videos shared on social media appear to show flares being let off in Glasgow city centre and masked people running through the streets. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke yesterday at a memorial for former BC Premier John Horgan.
Combining progressive values, pragmatism, wisdom, and compassion, he never shied away from challenges, but above all, he had an extraordinary sense of humor. To the people of British Columbia who greatly admired him and who he so clearly loved back, he will always be John from Langford. John, it was an incredible joy and privilege to have worked alongside you, but more than anything, it was an honor to call you my friend. Merci.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and BC Premier David Eby were also at the memorial, along with several BC politicians. Horgan died last month of cancer at the age of 65. When dozens of employees at Click Health said they wouldn't be able to hug loved ones over the festive season, the company created some magic to surprise their team members. In a new video called Holiday Hugs, the company first produced some amazing AI embraces for their workers' missing loved ones. Then, those heartwarming deepfakes led to surprise appearances ending in real-life, in-person hugs.
Do you recognize that photo?
Yes, my grandmother. That's beautiful. That's special. Thank you. That's really sweet. I can feel her hug.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Oh, thank you so much. I love you so much. Oh my gosh. What? Oh, what are you doing here? Oh.
I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website at thenewsforum.ca. Good night, Canada.